Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. So today I kind of want to talk about what my plan is for Tomb of Sargeras between playing Holy, between playing Disc, and what I will be choosing and how I'll be going about those decisions and stuff like that. So I've gotten a ton of questions of if I'm going to main Disc, if I'm going to main Holy, and honestly, you really don't have to main one or the other. Previously in Nighthold, for example, it was pretty damn hard. I don't think anybody who killed Gul'dan before 715. I don't think anybody actually switched gears in between Holy and Disc for the fights, because the Paragon trait, the artifact power differences and stuff like that were just so heavy. They were so great that no one really wanted to farm up two of the, 54 traits and switch gears between the two along with relics and stuff like that and deal with that during Mythic Nighthold progression. I don't think anybody really wanted to do that. So I certainly didn't. I played Holy the entire time. And it was something where I was just like, well, I don't really want to take the effort to do all that because I'm already raiding 4 or 5 days a week and stuff like that. So it was not worth the effort. But going into Tomb of Sargeras, the limiting factor is Concordance, which is really easy to get. I already have Holy and Disc filled out. I'm almost done with getting Shadow. And then, of course, it's going to be Relics and then what's good for what fight. What is beneficial for what fight. And throughout Nighthold, we really didn't see too much of a difference in between... do you want to play Holy for this? Do you want to play Disc for this? There was nothing that really stood out, said, oh, okay, I have to play Holy for this. I have to play Disc for this. You kind of saw it, and I say kind of, with Gul'dan, where most guilds for the 3rd Black Harvest, the Disc Priest was just completely out of range of everybody, and that had some issues with it, although their barrier was still very, very useful in general. And that was one area where I saw many Disc Priests using their barrier, but it wasn't an impossible fight by any stretch of the imagination for them. There was just one specific part where they struggled with, and that was basically just because they outranged the boss, And I saw many of them that were able to run up after the storm and still hit the boss and stuff like that. But it was just that one phase. It wasn't that big of a deal. It wasn't the end of the world for them, right? But in terms of what we're looking at in Tomb of Sargeras, though, I've tested about 6 or 7 of the bosses, I believe, through PTR. Including Heroic Kil'jaeden, and so far I've noticed that the boss rooms are gigantic. They're absolutely gigantic. There is a lot of space for everyone to kind of be spread out, and in many times you are encouraged to spread out as ranged. And you're looking at multiple fights where the bosses will kind of jump across the room, or they might not be in range. And that's, the first thing that comes to my mind is, are you able to be hitting the boss? You're looking at, historically, you'll find fights like Lei Shen, where there's a transition phase where, there was some damage going out, but it wasn't that big of a deal. But Disc at that time had tools. It was much different at that time. So it had tools to deal with that. Whereas you look at Kil'jaeden today, well, we're going to be finding a fight that, the transition phases are going to be quite difficult, not impossible, but quite difficult to heal. And it's mainly because of how the boss will fly across the room, and you'll see it in some of the footage here, where the boss will fly across the room while there's all kinds of raid damage going out, and the group has to soak or stack on mechanics, all kinds of other things like that, which is really, really inconvenient. So I do have some concerns about that. It wasn't impossible on Heroic, but it definitely was very annoying. I do have some concerns about Mythic, but again, we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it. So that's something that's in the back of my mind that I'm kind of thinking of. The Maiden encounter as well was kind of frustrating. Again, not impossible, but frustrating with how the boss would teleport across the room, and then you have to reach her and cancel her cast and things like that. But it is a period of time where there's raid-wide damage going off, you are out of range of the boss, and, there's more garbage, basically, for you to be dealing with at the same time. So at the same time that you're trying to get back to the boss as quick as you can, you have to be soaking up all these orbs that are leading to the boss, and doing all these other mechanics again while raid damage is happening. So those are some situations where, it might stand out of saying, well, I don't really want to play it for this fight, or you may edge away from playing it and might choose Holy to play for this fight. Again, it may not be something that you're forced to do, but that'll be something if you want to switch hit, if you want to be able to play both, as I'm looking to possibly be doing, that'll be something where on progression, and specifically Mythic progression, when we're taking, a day or a number of hours in order to kill one boss, I'll be able to have that kind of flexibility to say, okay, well, I've tried, 20, 30 pulls on Holy, let me switch to Disc and let me see how it starts working for me here, because I'm at the point where I'm comfortable with my healing. The healing is not a problem, it's not an issue, it's just a mechanical issue from here. You see that a lot with Mythic progression. For like me on heroics, I don't think I'm gonna be. I think I'll be playing mostly holy, just because we will be able to clear it much more rapidly than we would for the mythic fights. So probably when I get to like Kil'jaeden, I'll see if I can switch gears in between holy and disc, because that on heroic will definitely take us a lot longer. We will be raiding 4 days and 16 hours a week, Monday through Thursday. Yep. And if you guys want to check out any of our progression and stuff like that, it'll be linked in the description below. I'll be streaming all of it. But I kind of wanted to give some of my thoughts on that. And, you know, you kind of see the same thing, the same side of the coin for Holy, where how mobile are fights. You know, just like Maidens is kind of frustrating for when the boss teleports across the room, well, it's also going to be raid damage happening at the exact same time on 2 sides of the room, you know? And there's a lot of spot healing required. There's a lot of just healing in general that's going to be required for everybody. And Trank may not always hit everybody, and that's definitely a big concern. And as you know, Divine Hymn is definitely not going to be hitting everybody, and you're definitely not going to be able to move much with it. So, you know, for that I kind of look at certain parts of the fight where it's actually favorable to be using Divine Hymn where I don't have to worry about movement. You'll look at a fight like Spellblade or on Gul'dan, there's a lot of parts of the fight where there's raid-wide damage and movement. If you can allocate, you know, that section to your Druid, and then you can find another area where that you'll be able to Divine Hymn and there's no movement required, kind of like the 3rd Black Harvest on Mythic Gul'dan, or the Fire Phase for Spellblade, and you're saying, oh, okay, well, I don't have to move anywhere, and thus it's kind of irrelevant to worry about Divine Hymn being immobile, you know, saying, oh my gosh, Divine Hymn's immobile, whatever, you know. It's not that big of a deal if you're able to find a window in time where you're able to stand still, you know. If there's ever the argument that's saying, oh, okay, well, we want a 2nd Druid instead of the Holy Priest because he can move and stuff like that. Well, that doesn't mean anything if he's just going to trank and stand still, you know, and there's an area of the fight where you can easily, you know, use your channeled cast and stand still. Well, then it doesn't matter what you're casting. Then you're just looking at bringing the better player. Looking at other fights, and just in general with Tomb of Sargeras, the rooms are gigantic, and there doesn't seem to be as much spot healing as I really would have thought going into this instance. So, in general, you are seeing quite a bit more burst damage, but it's not to the point where if you don't top everybody off, they just instantly die. A good case study of this is basically like Siege of Orgrimmar in the Sea Treacher Black Fuse encounter. So if you played back then and you played back in MoP, historically, and just in general for healers, historically, the further you go into an expansion, the more burst damage is going on because the healer power creep gets higher and higher, and they never really have perfected a way to scale your stamina at the same rate so that they can actually keep on having constant damage and things like that. They've done a little bit better historically, but it always does get burstier and burstier because they have to keep on challenging the healers that are now able to cast a few spells, top people off much faster than they were at the beginning of the expansion. So that's where the damage starts getting burstier, and you have to kind of be on top of things. But Siege of Orgrimmar in Sea Treacher Black Fuse, if you didn't top people off before a mechanic, they just instantly die. You'd be, you know, 5 healing 25 mans, and you just have people drop like flies when one healer has to run his laser out, and then you're down a healer, and suddenly raid damage happens, and then you lose 1 or 2 people here and there. You lose 1 or 2 people here and there, and then the fight's over, right? We're not seeing that quite yet. Again, PTR testing can be kind of overtuned, undertuned in many areas, so that's something to kind of keep in mind. But so far, we're not hitting that kind of crappy point of power creep for healers that they're having this ridiculous burst damage happening. But it definitely is something to watch out for. It definitely is something that will push more burst healing into a higher and higher position, and then that will be very suitable to disc. But the other part of the equation is, what is the spot healing required of a fight? So if you're looking at Star Augur, for example, Star Augur was one fight where it was very difficult to properly spot heal if all your healers were not focusing the right targets. You saw it with Mark of Frost and Spellblade. Those 2 fights really pushed your healers to be spot healing better and better, and really pushed them to be healing up the correct targets. Now that Powered Radiance is getting the smart healing component, that'll help them out a little bit in terms of getting the right targets hit with Atonement and getting them topped off and things like that. Also being able to switch in Shadow Mend a little bit more frequently will also be a little bit more beneficial. So that's very helpful. And on the other side of it, so far we're not seeing that many fights that have those kind of Star Augur, Spellblade single target nukes and single target debuffs that are going on many players that need to be topped off rapidly. We're seeing a lot more just AoE burst damage in general. So to me, that says, well, if I'm confident with my raid heal team, and I'm confident that their spot healing is up to snuff, I'm confident that they can do that very well, you know, maybe I can go disc for this. Maybe I will go disc for this, because then I'll be able to top off the burst damage faster than anybody else. And that's one of the things that disc succeeds with so well. So I'm putting players up at higher levels of health. The second, you know, damage goes out, right after that, I'm topping everybody off, or I'm getting them out of a danger zone, and then we can top them off steadily before the next bursts happen. You know, those are the kind of things to watch out for. Holy definitely does have good burst healing, but it's nothing on the same level as Disc. So it kind of depends on the requirements, you know. But if you're into a fight where there's multiple targets that are taking lots and lots of spot damage, well then, you know, you start seeing, well, Holy might be a little bit better for this. And it's not that one is impossible to play on another fight, but it might be something, if you are equally skilled with both of them, or you're well versed in both of them, that you might kind of consider. And that's something I'm going to be considering as well. You know, I feel it's very easy to kind of step into any fight and do pretty well as Holy, but this definitely takes a little bit more of a grind to get used to the encounter. I know I was seeing it so often with Fallen Avatar, where I would enter the fight as Disc, and then I was, you know, middle of the pack, you know, pretty low. And then by, you know, the latter half of our progression of our hour worth of PTR testing, I was like skyrocketing above everybody because I was so used to the fight, and I was used to the fight. I knew what I needed to do. My evangelism and Delight's Wrath timings were working perfectly. You know, I was able to get everything I wanted out of it. So those are the kind of things to kind of keep in mind, where if you are getting comfortable with an encounter, you're getting used to an encounter, you have time to get used to an encounter, because looking at Mythic boss fights, it definitely will take time for your guild to get them down compared to a Heroic, so you will have more time to get used to your timings and everything like that, you know. Then it can be a lot more beneficial to switch gears, and those are kind of the things I want to look at and, you know, talk to you guys about, of what my plan will be, you know, what I will be looking at as I'm working on progression, as I'm streaming progression, and doing whatever I can to, you know, make my healer team succeed, you know. Hope you guys enjoyed just some of my quick thoughts on what I'd like to be doing for the patch, and what I will be doing when Tomb of Sargeras comes out. Hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all next time.